Ladies and gents, boys and gals, welcome to a brand new episode of Thirsty Tales. Today, we have with us Mr. Shannon, a man who went from big brains to big brains plus big gains. What I'm referring to over here is Mr. Shannon was a lawyer in the field, working hard day and night, day in, day out, all right? He worked in the field for 10 years, and then he decided to change into his passion, which is gym instruction and functional fitness. I definitely know what I'm talking about. I do not know what I'm talking about. And that's why this episode is over here, to learn about Mr. Shannon, his mindset, him as a lawyer, him as a gym instructor, and all of these amazing things. And just as a side note, because we know that all of you guys are really observant people, you might be noticing that Som and I are wearing almost matching hoodies which say Hidden Figures. This will be our sponsor for today, and there's going to be more from us later on in the episode. But Mr. Shannon, full focus on you.
Sure.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go into okay. So, Mr. Shannon, now initially you are a lawyer. Now, what was your life like as a lawyer, and why did you decide, oh, that's the life I'm going to leave behind and move on?
Sure. Yeah, as a lawyer, people look at, I think you look at lawyers as sort of look at law as a glamorous profession.
Yeah, for suits.
Yeah, you think suits. Funny enough, I haven't yet watched that show. I still need to watch that show.
Wait, 1 second. So you're saying that you were in the firm for 10 years, but you never watched Suits?
Yeah, roughly 10 years. But I mean, I dealt with law for so long. I didn't like law shows. Yeah.
Okay, you didn't have time. You were actually doing Suits. That's why you didn't have time to watch it, yeah?
For the most part, yeah. Definitely. But yeah, as a lawyer, I mean, it was fun. It had its moments. Definitely had its moments. Sure. In South Africa, where I'm from, we still do the whole old school wear the robe thing. We don't wear the wigs, thankfully,
nice.
But we still wear robes. Got to walk through the courts in your robes, no matter the heat, no matter the temperature. So, got to do that. It has its moments. You know, in court, you do sometimes feel like you're in a TV show. You're in your suit. No one else is in a suit except the attorneys. You know, you get a certain amount of respect. But in the same vein, you also sometimes tend to get a certain amount of disrespect as well. You know, as a lawyer, it's a very high stress job or profession. And for the most part, you know, if I always say to people, my stress levels as an attorney was almost always at like an 8 or 9 out of 10,
Whoa.
Even when I was on holiday or weekends, because you don't really,
you don't.
job.
Why
Yeah,
is
you
that
always
exactly
deal with
though?
drama.
Like, what specifically? Why? Because 8 or 9 out of 10 always.
Yeah.
That is not a good life to
No.
be living. And now I kind of feel you, bro. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. I was at a pretty good firm as well, a fairly small firm, fairly family-oriented, but even so, that mean that I sort of climbed the ranks a bit quicker because I became a director of the law firm. I was a partner by the age of 28. And
as I said, living Suits, yeah, living the life of Suits.
And even though perhaps, you know, at the end of the day, pay is maybe not as great as large firms, you're still making a pretty good living. But the stress is all on you. The pressure is all on you. You know, I had a whole support staff behind me, and at the end of the day, you know, you're supporting them, you're supporting their households. If you can't handle the ship, then, you know, everything sinks around you. So
100%.
It's that constant pressure. You know what you're working for, you know what you're fighting for. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I just, as far as the emotional, physical and psychological stress was, it just eventually, you know, weighed on me so much. And like I said, being a director, I was a director for about 2.5-3 years. And that's obviously when you realize how much is riding on you the whole time.
Were there any specific instances where you were like, oh man, why am I doing this
Or
job?
like, was there like a specific like incident? Like maybe you can tell us like an example of a time when you were a lawyer where you're like, shit.
Sure.
This is hard. Like I can't handle this.
Every single day.
Oh my goodness, really?
Or many days. Like I said, it had its moments. You have your moment when you're on the phone with a client and you settle something for millions or a few 100,000 or something. You really feel, like I said, you know, you really feel like something out of a movie or something out of a TV show.
Rush,
And you really think, you know, or you're in court and, you know, you've dealt with a case really well or picked up on something someone didn't expect.
Sweet.
But that's maybe 5 to 10% of the time. The rest of the time is, you know, you're getting blindsided by someone or a client's not really giving you the full information, the full story. So just so many things that can go wrong. and usually, in my experience, would go wrong. At least once. You learn from it. It never happens again if it goes wrong. But there were so many variables. I dealt a lot with insurance companies, massive companies, and a lot of the times you're dealing with insureds who actually don't really care about the insurance companies. Contract with them, even though they're obliged to help you, they don't always want to. So it's always an uphill battle. It feels like you're swimming upstream the whole time. That's kind of every single day, day in, day out.
The reason that I'm asking so much about this is because even I sort of considered law as a profession before, but more importantly, I have a lot of friends that want to go into law and that life.
Yeah.
What kind of person do you think one needs to be to go into that profession?
Or what do you think that maybe people don't tell you about being a lawyer? That when you become
precisely, this is the tangent that this question sort of is implying.
Sure. Man. So if I think back, there's a lot of things I wish someone would have told me. Obviously, everybody says that they would like to go back in time. I think it taught me a lot in any event, even for what I do now, which we'll obviously get into. But especially about business. Again, being a director, you're not just a senior attorney or whatever. You're not just an attorney dealing with cases, but you're running a business. Like I said, you've got so many people you've got to support at the end of the day. So you do have to have a certain mindset. It already starts when you study, though. So you'll probably realize if it's for you or not for you when you're studying. I have been for a long time a bit of a sucker for punishment. So I did just wait out the studies, got into a firm, did my articles, which is what we do in South Africa. It's every step of the way is pretty grueling for the most part. You have to be pretty. Well, I wouldn't say necessarily committed to law, but you have to be a committed person. You have to be able to, really endure that pain or that discomfort because the exams, the theory, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, writing the bar exams, that was pretty terrible if I think back. Some of the worst times as far as, tests and exams are concerned. But yeah, I think, I don't want to dishearten people either. It's just that I had an out and I preferred something more. It's like I said, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Those little wins that make you feel like a superstar, for some people that's enough. That's their 90%, but for me it felt like the 10% of the equation. Right. That makes sense. And yeah, I think you just need to go, you need to do your research as well going into law if you are going to do it. Like I said, I don't want to dishearten people or dissuade them away from it at all. But you got to work hard, like with anything.
I got another question with this. Now, being a lawyer, that means you have to grind and work out your 20s to enjoy a nice life at the 30s. So that from high school onwards, you have to work really hard.
100%. Even in high school, yeah.
Now, of course, I have a question, which is that do you think that grind is worth it? Do you think that people should give up or sell their kind of 20s or their 18 to onwards for the career and then after that live that 30s life, which is great? Or do you think that life is kind of a bit overrated and not worth it? Of course, this varies from people to people. Some people will love the grind hard to your 20s. Of course, you hear people say grind hard to your 20s, enjoy your 30s. But do you think that life is really a life that people should be living?
Short answer, I'd say no. If I have to just give you a straight up answer, I would say no.
And why is that?
Yeah.
Largely, if I think about it, I went straight from high school. A lot of people, it's a trend in South Africa at least. I don't know so much internationally, but a lot of people do a gap year, for instance, after high school, or they might even do a gap year after their university studies, their degree or whatever. I went straight from high school, went straight into studying, and I did a 4-year LLB, which is one of the harder courses, maybe not as hard as, for instance, a BCom law, but LLB is kind of, it's essentially honors and your BA compressed into 4 years.
We've heard of that, yeah.
It's pretty hard. So it was constant stress. And then straight from there, went straight into my articles, straight into law school, straight into practice, and it just sort of snowballed, just kept going.
Into that, yeah.
And eventually, again, became a director, which came sooner than I had anticipated.
Yeah, just a question about that.
Yeah.
How exactly did you rise up the ranks so quickly to becoming a director? Because,
again, like I said earlier, I was at a fairly small firm. So when I started there were 2 directors plus all of their, support staff, secretaries, typists.
About what, 20, 30 people?
If I think of it now, probably only around 10 people. 10 people. We built it up to about 20 people or so, but that was eventually, we had the director I worked under initially, after my first year, he ended up leaving, creating his own firm. And then we went back to sort of, the senior director or the sole director at that stage, running the show essentially. And then from there, eventually, myself and another young attorney, same age, he had just started his articles a year later than me. He took a gap year at some stage. But he, if I remember correctly, I could be misremembering, but in any event, we both then I was 1 year ahead of him. He went abroad for 1 year as well in between his articles, after he finished articles. But in any event, he came back, joined the firm, and we were kind of running it with the senior director. And then eventually the director said to us, he wants to sign both of us on. So both of us ended up signing on pretty much exactly the same age, separated by a few months, sort of inject some new life into the firm. And there was 3 of us, and each of us had about 2 to 4 staff, if I'm thinking about it now, because we had article clerks that would sort of change between us. But yeah, we had a whole, support staff and everything. So it was a little bit easier to rise up the ranks in that firm. But that didn't come with its challenges. Obviously, a smaller firm means a lot more responsibility, which meant when the director I dealt with, when I was dealing with him, he started loading me up on a lot of work way too soon. And then he left. And then I had to, deal with his problems because in that firm, he took some of his clients, but the bulk of the clientele, actually, it was one massive insurance company, which the initial partner created, stayed with me. And that was, essentially throwing me into the deep end. So I had to swim very quickly. That's the short answer.
I mean, right, yeah. And there's one thing you touched on, which I was about to ask you, which is we've always heard there's so much politics that goes on in the law field, and everyone's backstabbing each other. It's like a really cutthroat environment.
Yeah.
Is that true? Do you want to elaborate?
So, do you like helping charity?
Did you say no? Bro, I'm genuinely offended at that, man.
Well, now is your chance to help out.
Buy these shirts and hoodies to support the children of minorities in STEM, such as the NBCDI community.
Hey, those look like the Hidden Figures from Netflix.
You are absolutely correct, Soham, and you can learn more about that by scanning this integrated QR code on the shirts and these hoodies.
Well, now, if you want to help out, contact our friends Sahil and Sid, whose information will be up here, or you can contact the organization directly, who are up here. Thank you so much, everybody. And now, back to the video.
In my firm, I must say, I've always said it, even when I was working there, and that's one of the reasons I got out in my firm that I was at. It was probably the best you could find in law as far as that's concerned. Personal relationships, that sort of thing. The senior partner, although maybe we didn't see 100% eye to eye all the time, pretty reasonable dude. If he ever sees this, Adam, I'm not talking shit about you.
It's okay. I mean, that's no problem because even if anything goes wrong in this episode, we have a lawyer. So it's all right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So it was a lot. I would say easier. In inverted commas, it wasn't necessarily easy, but a little bit easier to rise through the ranks. It wasn't a massive commercial firm, although we did punch largely above our weight with a lot of the commercial firms. We were even on some lists. We had some friends in other firms that said we were always on the list when they discussed meetings, of competitors. These big firms had our name on their, in their targets essentially.
That's something we're proud of.
Because we would do a lot of work for the massive insurance companies in South Africa. So for the most part, we really did, I wouldn't say steal, but we worked hard to get that clientele, to get that basis in South Africa. So, yeah, it was a bit easier for me to get up there. But like I said, that firm being pretty much the best you could find in SA as far as that was concerned, environment or what have you, it just still wasn't, it was still very stressful. Understood. And that's why I decided I couldn't go anywhere else. That was the only place. It was either there or nowhere else.
All right, now you're talking about how you couldn't go anywhere else, and then you decided to become a gym instructor in Thailand. Now, what sparked that change in you to decide, I want to become a gym instructor? Or what, you forget even about gym instructor, what sparked that change about moving to Thailand? So 2 parts.
Sure.
1, instructor, and 2, Thailand.
Sure. Okay, so I might digress a little bit as I go through this. But there's a lot of information behind that as well. I was also I initially did it recreationally. I was an obstacle course racer. I don't know if you've ever heard of Spartan race, that sort of thing. But I was an obstacle course racer initially, when I sort of from university. It was something I always wanted to do.
Okay,
I actually, going all the way back, I'll try not to digress too much, but I wanted to join the military at some stage. It just wasn't really an option in South Africa, at least personally. And I just started getting to sort of military style fitness. I started seeing like obstacle course races around the world, and then eventually a big one sort of landed in South Africa.
Sweet.
And I started doing it recreationally. You can do it as a team as well, which is just for fun.
What kind of activities would you do in these obstacle courses?
So it ranges. You have different distances. It can be 5Ks, it can be 30Ks, it can be even more. Spartan has something called an Ultra Beast, which is more than 50Ks, which I haven't yet done, but that's over 50Ks.
The magic
I
power
love
of the word.
it's like we have David Goggins over here, but like chiller. And then PG rated. Yeah.
So when it comes to that I eventually got into that a bit more seriously, and it was about a 5-year journey where I went from being, sort of competitive to, I would say, professional, professional obstacle course racer. Still in the top 10 when it came to middle distance, and then longer distance was around top 20. But very competitive in South Africa. I did that for about 5 years while I was practicing law. Specifically coming out of university, then all the way up. I'm trying to think, I think it was actually longer. It might have been more like 7 years as well. I'm trying to put the timelines together, but I did it up until my last competitive race was actually March 2020, and then COVID hit. So that was actually the main reason for me kind of getting out of it competitively.
Right.
I sort of started dabbling in CrossFit and what have you, and that's kind of how I eventually got here. But yeah, so I always had that passion for fitness. I trained myself. I always trained myself. Whatever it was, I started out with calisthenics, which was body weight training.
I love that.
Then did a lot of endurance.
Can you do the flag?
I can do handstands, I can do muscle ups. Flag was something I always struggled with. I trained it. I could do a 5-second planche at a stage. But my handstand, I think my freestanding, like no moving handstand was over a minute. That's my
So do you think the flag
ultimate.
is one of your goals? You think like in the
I must say, as far as calisthenics is concerned, I'm not too concerned with like heavy skills anymore besides handstands, handstand push-ups, handstand walking, that sort of thing. Flag is not something I find like functionally applicable because I've become a lot more focused on function. I eventually became a CrossFit level 1 coach.
Yeah.
What exactly is this? Like, what is function? What's CrossFit level 1? Because
Explain to some of the viewers that may not know what you're talking about.
So CrossFit. CrossFit. If I have to explain that, I've come from, like I said, I've come from many different fields. I've dabbled in so many different disciplines. I did MMA for 2 years at a stage as well. And then again, like I said, calisthenics, which was all handstands, body weight, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, eventually, for obstacle course racing, I took some aspects of CrossFit. CrossFit itself is, we define it as highly varied, high intensity, and functional exercises performed at a high intensity for different time domains, essentially. So it can be anything. It can be a mixture of running and weightlifting, and weightlifting in the sense of Olympic weightlifting, clean and jerk, snatching, that sort of thing. Using rowing machines, swimming, whatever.
The thing with the
whatever it might be. I know a lot of people say that. I said that. Sorry, just for some context, someone doesn't agree with CrossFit. I said that for a very long time. I didn't agree with it for a very long time. During my obstacle course racing years, I didn't. I didn't believe in it completely. And there were a lot of people that were fitter than me that were into CrossFit, a lot of people that I would beat that were into CrossFit. So it was sort of on both spectrums. But I weighed, if I have to give some context to my argument, I used to weigh 69 kilograms when I trained obstacle course racing. I could run, for instance, like a 540 mile. When I did CrossFit, obviously I have a bit more background in endurance, but when I went over to CrossFit, my volume reduced when it came to running. My volume reduced by maybe 90%. I could run a mile at 5:35, 5:37, so a bit faster. And I weigh at the moment 82 kilograms. So that's a lot more muscle, but I can move as fast as I used to. So that's my argument. Like I said, it's not for everyone. It is very different, and it depends on the people as well. But CrossFit, just highly varied, very high intensity. Usually, I mix that a lot. Though I'm not a pure CrossFit practitioner. I mix it a lot with pure endurance, and I mix it a lot with old school calisthenics too, strict stuff, that kind of stuff. So many different many different fields that I've combined together.
As a person who's been getting into calisthenics a little bit, I have to ask you, for a beginner, what would you recommend them? Like, how should one start calisthenics? Because I've noticed this trend of more and more people going towards calisthenics.
Yeah.
Because it's cheap, you can do it like literally in your house and things like that. So yeah, how should a beginner?
Exercise,
Yeah, but what's like a
Yeah.
step-by-step thing for a beginner to just start?
Basics. Make sure that your basics are good, and that means really truly basics. Body weight squats. Call them air squats. Making sure that your mechanics are good. Push-ups and pull-ups. You got to make sure those
How many
are there.
pull-ups do you think people should be able to do, like, to get to that point where they can move up?
Sure,
themselves?
it depends on every person. Some people can't do a pull-up from the ground up. Just giving them a bar, telling them to do a pull-up. Regressing movements is also important. If you can do stuff like inverted rows for viewers, if you need to Google that.
Right.
Inverted rows,
we're gonna
that
photo
sort
that
of
up
thing.
there.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So you gotta regress things as well. But for the most part, making sure that you do the basics and lots of reps and sets. So doing the basics, push-ups, sit-ups. That sort of thing. Lunges, body weight squats.
When you say lots of reps and sets, what do you mean exactly?
Technically, there's so many different ranges you can look at in fitness. If you're looking at building strength versus, building muscle. When it comes to calisthenics, though, for the most part, you're largely looking at muscular endurance. You can build muscle with it as well. There's no real alternative to lifting heavy stuff, though, if I have to be, honest.
Okay.
But that's something that CrossFit teaches you is the well-roundedness of an athlete, being able to do the calisthenics, but also move external weight as well.
But also, I have a question now. When people do a lot of different exercises, there comes that point where it's like hypertrophy, strength, or then endurance.
Yeah.
What like rep range do you think, like in many exercises, that people should try and aim for? Because of course it's a very heavily debated topic in a lot of people's minds.
General rules when it comes to what phases you might be in or what you're looking at. So like hypertrophy, for instance, you're generally looking at scarring the muscle tissue. You want to break down the muscle tissue. So you're looking at close to max and repeatable sets as well. Minimal rest for the most part. But I mean, if I have to give you something basic and say, do this, you should build muscle if you do it enough, is, like four sets of 12 to 15 push-ups, for instance, something basic like that. If you're looking at strength, when it comes to pure strength, generally, if you're looking at pull-ups and stuff, some people might struggle with pull-ups. So doing like 4 sets of 5 with a good 90 seconds rest, or if you're doing max effort sets, resting completely and repeating max effort sets with like complete rest of 2 to 3 minutes, that's good. But it largely depends on what you're looking at. When it comes to lifting, it's maybe a little bit more clean cut. Like powerlifters, for instance, if you're looking at building strength, you're looking at 3 to 5 rep range. You're getting a lot of stimulus. It's highly stimulating to your central nervous system. And for that reason, you're going to be doing 3 to 4 sets, maybe even 5 sets of 3 to 5 reps. And you're looking at a lot of rest there, 3 to 5 minutes. For the most part, I've dabbled in a little bit of powerlifting. I don't call myself a powerlifter, but you're sitting on a bench resting. It's super intense for like 20 seconds and then you sit down. So, it depends what you're doing. When you're looking at calisthenics, I'd say in that range of, it depends what you're testing. But if you're doing push-ups, a good range to start at is like 3 sets of 10 with 60 seconds rest for, basic answer. But there's so many different ways you can do it. You can stack moves up. You can do push-ups and pull-ups together. Minimal rest for the sake of also some conditioning. It all differs depending on what you're doing. But I'd say get a coach. Get a coach, at least to do the basics, get through it. It would help.
So I'd like to say that now there are a lot of people who want to generally start. What advice would you have for people who maybe either A, are not as athletic, or of course I know a lot of people who aren't as athletic but they have the will, the drive that okay, I want to do this, I want to improve my life. People who could be of different so just a question, how can people get into this like fitness field?
Sure. A good place to start is calisthenics, like we said earlier. Again, you can do that wherever you want to. So if you're not comfortable going into a gym or you don't feel confident enough, I'd say, start at home. That's largely how I started as well. Calisthenics at home.
Yeah, could you also drive us through how you started? How did you build your body? Like, no, of course, not build your body, but how did you sort of like build your strength, your fitness?
Sure. Like I said, I started out with calisthenics. I was always a fairly athletic kid, though. Always climbed trees, always ran, played sports, that sort of thing. I was always a good swimmer naturally as well.
Nice.
But for the most part, when it comes to starting out, like I said, doing the basics, getting to where you can do the basics really well. And that applies too. If you can do push-ups, bench press is a very similar move at the end of the day. If you've got that function, you've got some of that strength, you can move on to more complicated stuff like weightlifting, whatever you might, look at that as, if it's powerlifting or Olympic weightlifting. But for the most part, I would also say don't be scared to approach people. If you do start at a gym, if you see there's someone that's more experienced there, ask them. Obviously, not everyone's friendly, but I found that I've learned a lot more from people in a gym than, trying to learn yourself. Like I said, a lot of my own stuff is self-taught, but I've also taken a lot from many other people. When I did obstacle course racing, I raced with professionals, I raced with the top guys in the country. I always learned from them. If there was something I maybe wasn't as good at as them. And same with CrossFit now. I work at Iron Hive here on my shirt. Work at Iron Hive. They're largely a powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, and CrossFit gym. And from a lot of their coaches, who are my colleagues, I've learned a lot from them. They've improved me more than, my own, more than getting a coach would have improved me, just because, again, everyone's friends there. Right. But, learning from people are better than you. Leave your ego at the door, ask for help if you need it. And, if financially you're able to, again, like I said earlier, a coach isn't a bad start if you're looking at basics, especially if you have something specific in mind, like if you're going into, powerlifting or weightlifting of some sort. A lot of those things can be very technical. So getting a coach really does help. And probably would have helped me if I had done that earlier. But like I said, I'm a bit stubborn, or I was a bit stubborn. I'd say be a little less stubborn. Do as I say, not as I did. And find a coach sooner rather than later. Help get them to help you figure it out.
And I mean, Mr. Shannon, I've noticed the way you speak about gym and fitness and like the energy, the passion, versus the way you speak about law. And I have to ask you that I'm still a bit unclear as to, because you always knew you were meant for this, you were always really athletic. Why didn't you change your mind before, like even when you were studying?
Why did you even decide to go, and why did you decide that fitness was the field for me? What was those 10 years?
More than that, you can make a mistake. Like you can go into law, that's okay. But then why did you wait till you were in the field director and all of that? What exactly happened?
Because you were in there for 10 years.
Basically, what was your mindset like?
Sure. Coming out of university, or at least let's say out of high school, even though I was a bit more naturally athletic as a younger kid, I didn't necessarily like fitness. I wasn't actually a big fan of it. Like I said to you earlier, I actually came from basketball. That was probably my first love, was basketball. And I enjoyed playing the sport, but I hated fitness. Absolutely hated fitness. So, running laps, that sort of thing, doing push-ups, I hated that thing. And I remember in my final year of high school, we had sort of a coaching changeover. And the coach made me do 100 push-ups. And it was the first time I'd ever done 100 push-ups. And I was sore for like 2 weeks. But after that, I kind of realized, okay, I need to get better at this stuff. And then when I left high school, that was kind of when I started really getting into it. It was towards the end of high school and then, out of high school. And then, I suppose, for the most part, you get a lot of feedback from friends, family, people in different industries. In South Africa, a lot of people are fairly driven by the whole, money in general. It's sort of a whatever profession is going to kind of, be most lucrative at the end of the day, whether it's being an engineer, an accountant, all the usual suspects, a doctor, a lawyer. Lawyer kind of stood out to me. It made a bit more sense to me. Went into it. And then, like I said, I did kind of, I did both of them next to each other. I did do obstacle course racing professionally as well as law. And I think it was a matter of taking that plunge. Once you're in something, it's pretty scary to go another way. And at a stage, we had a house, I'd bought a house, a car, all those responsibilities, all the adult responsibilities that you have. Right. And everything kind of just adds up eventually. And it was just a matter of taking that plunge. And when we did, what we did was we sold our place. We then rented for a little while. Okay. And then after that, sold everything. And for the last 2 to 3 months, moved back in with my parents, which was actually not as bad as I thought it would have been. Just because we didn't want to tie ourselves down. Right. And then from there, straight out to Thailand.
What was it about Thailand that made you decide to move here?
So as a base for that argument, my brother-in-law has lived here at the moment. He's lived here for 11 years, so he's been here quite a while.
Brother-in-laws are here.
Yeah. So he moved here quite a while ago. He's been here as we're recording this for about 11 years. We had gone we had gone for honeymoon as well in 2017, so we got a bit of a feel for it. We had him this side, so he can give us, a bit of insider information,
of course.
essentially. And it's a very friendly country as well. Really like the culture.
The
everyone's friendly
hospitality,
here. And even though you do encounter a lot of non-English speakers, it's not like some other countries where it's kind of, it's rude. They're not rude
They're
here.
trying to.
Yeah, a lot of people
Thailand.
trying to accommodate you, which is really nice because, I'm coming into their country at the end of the day. Very, very, very friendly people. Sometimes I do miss home a lot, but if I'm being honest, sometimes I do really feel a bit more welcome here than I even did at home.
But also, I have another question here because this relates to a lot of people. Now, you had a whole life in South Africa. You had your friends. You had a lot of groups. How did you sort of leave that all and decide to start a new journey in Bangkok with your wife? Is it right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you and your wife, you guys came back here and you guys started a whole new life. How could you leave all that behind? How did that sort of happen to you? Because here, many people are scared to go to university and come back, but it's like here you left your whole life and you moved.
Sure. So it is still very difficult. I've got a little sister who's 13 years old, I believe now this year. So there's a massive gap between us. So it was about 18 years, say 17 and a half years between us. So, that was very difficult to obviously not leave her behind. She's obviously with my parents. But it's just, leaving family behind is the biggest thing. In law, I did not have as many... I had a lot of friends that I raced with in my obstacle racing community, but I didn't have very many friends when it came to my profession. That's why the profession itself, I felt very alien. I felt very, very removed from a lot of people. There's a distinct culture within South African law and the
less than just
firms.
like friends. It was more like colleagues than just friends.
I didn't have a problem with that, but definitely leaving friends was difficult. And my best friend in any event, who I met through actually training years before we raced together.
Sweet, okay.
My best friend had already done he had done an Asian tour. He actually worked in China for a while. Then at the moment they're actually in Vietnam.
Okay.
So there was a bit of that urge, he was like, it's good. Try it out. So we already had a bit of info from other people. And they've also left family behind. My father, in fact, lives in Australia and he has since 2001. So I have a little bit of experience with, having to remove myself from close family members too. If I have to be honest. So it wasn't too difficult, but leaving family is definitely a difficult thing. Probably one of the hardest was also leaving our dogs with my family. We have 2 dogs, so we had to leave them with my mom and my stepfather. So that really does suck. But that's just sort of how life works, I suppose.
Okay, I have a really important question over here. Your life has had a lot of ups and downs,
twists and
very
turns.
topsy-turvy.
Yeah.
How are you such a calm and just naturally chill person? Because even before we turned the camera on, you were really chill, just in your element, calm. How is that? Because I would have expected somebody who's paranoid, always, but you're absolutely calm.
Yeah,
chill,
and especially coming out of a law, a very hectic lifestyle law. How did
Sure, that and just the topsy-turvy.
I've always kind of been like that. My parents always also used to say that I was a bit more sort of grown up for my age, that I was always calm, sort of easy kid for the most part.
Sweet.
That's just sort of my personality. I come off sometimes as maybe a little bit disinterested, some people might say, or very monotone in my approach. But it's just how I've always been. The senior partner at the firm. My ex-partner at the firm in South Africa, he used to get irritated sometimes because I didn't look stressed out. I was always stressed out, but I didn't look. I've never, even in law, I've had this very
he was
calm.
I'm so stressed and I'm dying, but you're just chill. Oh God.
Yeah, so I've always kind of had that. For the most part, I do maintain it. But I would say if I have to give an answer, it's death metal. I listen to a lot of death metal.
Whoa.
So that's
when you achieve that peak of stimulation, everything is just
nothing else is exciting.
Yeah, nothing else is, oh my God. Any recommendations?
Yeah, so many. I think we can have a separate episode for that.
Oh my God. Rehan put these songs up there of Mr. Shannon's favorite songs of the
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. You gotta for peak relaxation and calmness.
Of course, because that's what death metal is most widely associated with.
Definitely, yeah. But that's always been me. Like I said, my ex-partner used to call me a duck. You know, a duck kind of on the surface of the water. They're very calm, but beneath their legs are moving the whole time. Yeah. So yeah, that's me. I've always been this way.
That's lovely.
That is phenomenal. Now, Mr. Shannon, I think we'd like to wrap this episode up with... All right, so Mr. Shannon, now you have gone all around the world. You've moved from South Africa to here. You've changed careers. You've gone from a lawyer to being a fitness instructor. And so you have had a lot of career changes. You have changed a lot in your life. And so with this, I'd like to segue and dive into our very final question, which is... Where do you see yourself in the next 10 years? Now, 5 to 10 years, what do you see yourself doing? Do you still see yourself in the fitness field?
Yeah, and this is really interesting for me because you've had this career change. Do you think there's going to be one more? Do you think you might move back to South Africa or however? Please go on.
Sure. Yeah, personally, we have some. I don't want to divulge too much, but I do have some plans. My wife and I do have some plans potentially for starting something. Again, I don't want to say too much, but something potentially in South Africa, business-wise. But with the possibility, at least in the beginning, of still running it from here because that's kind of what we're looking at. So. Also, nothing's set in stone. That's something that I realized. Again, we spoke about it earlier. I was in law for so long and then still made this change and it's still working out. So I nothing's set in stone, but I do see myself a bit more long-term in fitness in some way, shape or form, whether it be, coaching, being in a gym, opening my own gym, whatever the case might be. I definitely see myself in fitness, maybe even a little bit more on the event side, races, maybe that sort of thing.
Like organizing that stuff.
That kind of thing. But nothing, like I said, nothing's really set in stone for me. I don't think there will be another big career shift though, unless again it's within the business realm. Again, that's something law helped a lot with, is that I have that business savvy. So I think starting a business isn't out of the question. Even if that might be a little bit more away from fitness, I'll still never leave fitness. And yeah, that's pretty much me. That we may very well end up back in South Africa. We might end up in another country, but nothing's really set in stone. I'm trying now because I tried. I used to previously maybe plan a little bit too much. I try now not to plan too much and kind of take it as it comes, but still, within reason, being reasonable and planning to an extent. I hope that answers the question.
Awesome. What's one quote you would like to leave us with?
Oh, man, I cannot think of anything right now. I had something cool on my phone, but it's on the other side. So there's a saying in Latin. And funny enough, I should remember this because in law, I was the final class in South Africa to take legal Latin before it was discontinued. But I cannot think right now what it's called. I think it's... okay, I'm going to say it in English.
You could tell us the concept of it.
Yeah, so I'm going to say it in English. In English, it's I remain unvanquished. So, I think that's something to always think. Like I said, nothing's set in stone.
Right.
And whatever you might pursue, make sure that you're pursuing it to the best of your abilities. Always think that someone is out there working harder than you, because there most likely is someone working harder than you.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much that. Just always rise above, and it's probably not as bad as it seems, whatever it might be. Remember, people fought in wars to get us the freedom we have today. People fought in terrible conditions, grew up in terrible conditions. Thankfully, we're privileged enough to be here. So, I think just always have that in mind as well.
Sweet.
The same way Mr. Shannon has changed his life, so can you. Watch our podcast and learn more from insightful people like Mr. Shannon. And so with that, we'd like to say thank you to Mr. Shannon for coming on our show, educating us, and just helping us grow in a way. Mr. Shannon can change his life, and so can you. So with that, I'd like to say thank you all for watching this episode. We are on YouTube. We are on Spotify. We are on...
Everywhere,
actually. We're on everywhere. I'm trying to think about
TikTok.
We're on everywhere. We're on TikTok. We're on everywhere. And so with that, I'd like to say thank you. This is Thirsty Tales, out.